I'd like to thank you for joining me for the Interest of Time podcast. My name is Alejandro Reyes. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's get started right away. It's been a year since we've been on any videos or written any papers. We wanted to follow up with what's been going on in the global economy since this pandemic started last year. My name is Alejandro Reyes. I'm the author of The Interest of Time, A Great Balance Sheet Recession. You can find it at theinterestoftime.com and on Amazon. You'll have to type the whole thing into Amazon to find it because if you just type in The Interest of Time, it doesn't happen to come up. I'm not sure exactly why, but maybe that'll change one day. So let's talk about what's been going on in the economy since last March, because for a very long time I've been talking about this idea of balance sheet recession, and it was all theoretical. But recently it's become very real, right? We've actually started to see the data that backs up the claims that I've been making this whole time. So let's start right there with this idea of what is a balance sheet recession, and are we in one right now? Okay, so let's start with the definition of a balance sheet recession. You can go on Google, you can find the definition. It's very simple. A balance sheet recession is a type of economic recession that occurs when high levels of private sector debt cause individuals or companies to collectively focus on saving by paying down debt rather than spending or investing, causing economic growth to slow or decline. So before anything, I want you to stop and think to yourself, is this a situation that we have now? We're going to go over some more evidence, but I want you to start to think about this idea of a lack of aggregate demand by households and corporations while we're at the zero lower bound, where there's no other place to bring rates lower, and what has to happen to get out of this situation. Because this is exactly what happened during the Great Depression, right? 1929, the same exact thing happened. But in 1929, the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government took a different path, right? And so, I want to start with this idea of Richard Koo being the grand master of the balance sheet recession. He's the founder of it, and here we are now in a global balance sheet recession, and it's so great to have Richard Koo's work to draw from. And a lot of the things that are in my book are just really ideas that are drawing from Richard Koo's main thesis of a balance sheet recession is a borrower's condition, right? And so what does that mean? It means that when people get scared, they pull back, okay? So everybody knows what happened last year. There was a pandemic, and people were fighting in the aisles for toilet paper, right? Everybody was home, locked down, so everybody knows what happened. There was a drop in income, right, for the households and for the corporations. Everybody's home, they can't all make the amount of money that they're supposed to make. And so what happened? The U.S. government came in and borrowed that money and gave it to the households and the corporations, right? The households got what? Stimulus checks. The corporations got what? PPP loans, right? Now, is a loan something that you pay back? Usually, but in this instance, it was just a loan for the books because the money eventually ended up being all forgiven at the end. And so what happened? The U.S. government provided not only everybody's income that they were short, but an additional 15% of income, $3 trillion in deficit spending. And so why did they do that? It's a simple reason, right? The reason why they did it was to prevent a deflationary spiral. Okay? We say this, I know some people say, that makes no sense. It makes perfect sense, right? So we're going to talk about some of the data that backs up the thesis that we have here. And the first one is this idea of net private savings, right? So if you're on the podcast and you can't see the video here, I want you to take a look. You go on to Federal Reserve, data, and you can look at net private savings, right? And so what you see is very simple. $5 trillion has been saved by households and corporations since the start of the pandemic. So I want you to hear that again. $5 trillion has been saved. So what does that mean? If the private sector saves $5 trillion and nobody goes down to the bank to borrow any of that money, there's going to be a deficit of $5 trillion in the economy, right? Because the velocity of a dollar that's in your pocket not going anywhere, being saved, is zero, okay? There's no velocity for money that's in your pocket, okay? So what has happened? The government has had to borrow and spend that money to make sure that everybody is whole, right? One man's income is another person's spending. So if one person doesn't spend, the other one doesn't earn. It's a simple formula, right? So let's talk about more data that leads to our conclusion of we're in a balance sheet recession, and the Fed is actually doing the right thing by borrowing and spending money and assisting the Treasury in making everybody whole by adding income to the economy. So we're going to talk about it in a moment. So I want to talk about this idea of a liquidity trap, because a lot of people know that word. They don't know balance sheet recession, but they understand and they heard this idea of a liquidity trap. So what is a liquidity trap? We're going to go over it now. Here it is. A liquidity trap is caused when people hoard cash because they expect an adverse event such as deflation, insufficient aggregate demand, or war. Among the characteristics of a liquidity trap are interest rates that are close to zero and changes in the money supply that fail to translate into changes in the price level. Okay, so what does that mean again? Exactly what you're hearing from the Fed, which is saying, hey, we don't have any inflation, but when you go down to the store, you see prices shooting through the roof. The inflation that the Fed is looking for is inflation in loan growth. But what do they really have? They're seeing the money that they put into the economy to keep everybody whole overheating certain sectors, right? And so we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but this idea that everything's all better and we're back to doing great is false, right? And we're going to go over the data, we're going to prove it to you in a number of ways. So now I want to talk about this idea of why these people are saving money. And so this is where Richard Koo comes in, because he talks about this idea of animal spirits, right? And so what is animal spirits? And so I was lucky enough this week to speak with Warren Mosler. I got to speak with Warren for about an hour, and we went through some ideas, and I tried to convince him on a couple things. And one of these ideas I talked about was this idea of the casino. I said, so let's do a thought experiment, right? And so I said, listen, Warren, I said, what if you and me were going down to the casino, and let's say 98 of our friends were going to go as well? And I said, well, let's say we all had, $1,000 in our pocket, and we were going to bet that 1,000. So the 100 people that were going down to the casino, we all bet all of our money, we'd have $100,000 in the pot, right? In play at any given time. And so I like to think about that as a full bucket of economic water, right? And so now think about everybody getting ready to start betting, but right before they start to bet, there's an announcement comes over the loudspeaker, and the announcement says, hey, listen, outside there's a pandemic, and we're not really sure what's going to happen, but there's a very high likelihood that you're going to have to wear a mask when you leave and stand 6 feet apart from each other, and you could very well lose some income as well. It might not be good for the economy. So let's say we make that announcement in the casino, and then we ask everybody to start betting, right? The betting starts, the tables open up. What do you think is going to happen to everybody who's betting? Is everybody going to bet like they normally bet? Or are some people going to say to themselves, geez, you know what? I'm not really sure exactly what's going to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take $200 or $300 or $400, I'm going to put it in my pocket, and I'm going to save it. And if something gets better later on, then maybe I might spend it. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and take some of that money, I'm going to put it in my pocket, just save it. And if all the people in the casino decided to save $200 or $300 of the 1,000, 20 or 30%, then the casino has a very big problem, okay? And the casino in this instance is the United States government and the USA as a whole, because as those people start to save that money, we talked about one person's spending is another person's income. So if people don't spend $300 of their 1,000, and other people don't earn the 300, right? And so that's the situation that we have right now, right? The U.S. government is coming in to borrow and spend the $300 that the people are too scared to spend in the economy, right?